If a nurse has ever handed you a card that says O, and if the skin on the back of your hand is dark, you have almost certainly been told at some point that this combination means something ancient. That you are carrying the original human package, the first blood, the first skin, the oldest branch of the family. 2 of those 3 claims are wrong, and the third one is real in a way nobody puts on a thumbnail. Here is what is actually true. Your blood group system is roughly 20 million years old, and you share it with gorillas. The O in it is the youngest part, not the oldest. It is a broken gene, and it broke after our ancestors had already split from every other ape. And the genuine molecular trail left behind by the first human migration out of Africa does exist. It is written in pigmentation genes, and it runs from the Horn of Africa to southern India to Arnhem Land in a straight line you can still read today. None of it works the way you were told. All of it is better. Start with the blood, because the blood is the older story by a factor of 100. The ABO system was the first human genetic polymorphism anybody discovered, found by Karl Landsteiner in 1900 when he mixed blood from his own colleagues in a dish and watched some combinations clump. It is a difference in sugar. On the surface of your red cells sits a short chain of sugar molecules, and an enzyme encoded on chromosome 9 either adds one particular sugar to the end of it, or a different one, or nothing at all. Add the first and you are A. Add the second and you are B. Add neither and you are O. That is the whole of it. A blood group is a decoration on the outside of a cell, 3 sugars long. Now the part that should stop you. Those same A and B antigens are not human. They are found across the primates, in chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, gibbons, and Old World monkeys. And the specific amino acid changes that make the difference between A and B are the same changes in all of them. For decades, the assumption was that this must be convergence, different species stumbling separately onto the same trick. In 2012, a group led by Laura Seguirel tested that directly, comparing patterns of variation around the ABO gene in humans, gibbons, and Old World monkeys. Convergence did not fit the data. What fit was the other explanation, that these are the same alleles, inherited by descent, maintained continuously since before the species split apart. Earlier work using the same logic put a lower bound on it. The A and B lineages had already separated before the ancestors of humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans went their separate ways. That is at least 13 million years, and probably rather more. Which means the A in your family is older than the genus Homo, older than walking upright. It was already an old polymorphism when the ancestors of gorillas were still our own ancestors. And O? O is the recent one. O is what happens when the gene that adds the sugar stops working. In humans, the most common O allele is a single missing letter, one guanine deleted near the start of the coding sequence, which throws the reading frame out of alignment and produces an enzyme that does nothing at all. The A version is intact machinery. The O version is that machinery with a spanner through it. And here is the detail that finishes off the premise of this video. Across the primates, the A and B alleles are shared by descent between species. The O alleles are not. Each species has its own. Humans broke the gene one way, chimpanzees broke it another, and the same thing has happened independently in pigs, dogs, rats, cows, and rabbits, each with its own separate accident. So O did not come down to you from the first humans. O is the newest thing in the entire system, a loss-of-function mutation that our lineage generated by itself after we were already our own species, and then kept. Which raises the obvious question, if O is a broken gene, why is it the most common blood group on Earth? Because broken is not the same as useless, and because the ABO gene is under what biologists call balancing selection, pressure that actively preserves several versions rather than picking a winner. That is exactly why the polymorphism has survived 20 million years instead of settling on one allele. The pressure appears to be disease, and it pushes in several directions at once. Those surface sugars are also handles. A great many bacteria, viruses, and parasites recognize them, bind to them, or hide behind them by coating themselves in something similar. Change the sugar, and you change which pathogens can get a grip on you. Group O sits at a genuine advantage against severe malaria. The parasitized red cells of an O person clump less readily into the rosettes that block small blood vessels, and severe disease is less common. In regions where malaria has been killing children for thousands of years, that is an enormous force, and it is one reason O frequencies are high across much of sub-Saharan Africa and reach almost total fixation among indigenous populations of the Americas for entirely separate reasons of founder effect. It also cuts the other way. Group O is associated with more severe cholera and with lower levels of certain clotting factors, which is protective against thrombosis and unhelpful if you are bleeding. That is what balancing selection looks like from the inside. No version wins, because each version is winning a different argument in a different century against a different microbe. Now I want to stop and be straight with you about what your blood group cannot do, because there is an entire industry built on pretending otherwise. It cannot tell you your ancestry, not roughly, not approximately, not at all. Every major blood group is present in every large human population on Earth at some frequency. There are O individuals in Norway, Nigeria, Japan, and Bolivia. There are A individuals in all four. No genealogical or ancestry test anywhere uses ABO, and the reason is simple. A marker with 3 common states and worldwide distribution carries almost no information about where anybody came from. Ancestry inference uses hundreds of thousands of variants precisely because no single one of them means anything on its own. It also does not describe you. The Blood Type Diet, published in 1996 and still selling, assigns each group an ancestral role: O the hunter, A the farmer, B the nomad, and prescribes food accordingly. The scheme is built on the claim that O is the original human blood group, which we have just watched fall apart, and the ancestral roles are invented outright. When the diet was finally tested properly, on more than 1,400 people, the diets did produce health improvements in some participants, and the improvements had no relationship whatsoever to the blood group of the person eating them. The healthy diets were healthy for everybody. The same applies to Ketsueki Gata, the blood type personality system that has been part of Japanese and Korean popular culture since the 1920s and still shows up in dating profiles and, occasionally, in hiring. It has been studied repeatedly. There is nothing there. And the third claim, the one about skin, deserves the same treatment, because it turns out to be wrong in a much more interesting direction. In 2017, a team led by Nicholas Crawford and Sarah Tishkoff published a genome-wide study of skin pigmentation in around 2,000 people from ethnically diverse African populations, a group that had been almost entirely absent from pigmentation genetics until then. They came out with variants in and around 6 regions: SLC24A5, MFSD12, DDB1, TMEM138, OCA2, and HERC2. Then they dated them, and the results dismantle the whole framing. Most of the pigmentation alleles they identified, light and dark alike, are older than our species. They were segregating in the hominin lineage for hundreds of thousands of years before anatomically modern humans existed. For roughly half of the likely causal variants, the ancestral version, the older one, the one that came first, is the version associated with lighter pigmentation. And when they checked the Neanderthal and Denisovan genomes, which split from our line more than 800,000 years ago, those genomes carried the ancestral allele at every one of these loci, which points to a conclusion that runs directly opposite to the popular story. Very dark skin is not the original human condition that some populations later lost. It is a derived trait, something that evolved inside the genus Homo within roughly the past 2 million years, after our ancestors lost most of their body hair and exposed bare skin to equatorial sun for the first time. The hominins before that were probably pigmented moderately rather than deeply, under a coat of hair. And it kept moving after that, in both directions, continuously, everywhere. The clearest demonstration is inside Africa itself. Africa contains the widest range of skin tone found anywhere on the planet. From the very deeply pigmented Nilo-Saharan populations of South Sudan and Ethiopia, who are the most darkly pigmented people on Earth, to the considerably lighter San of southern Africa. and the San hold the deepest genetic lineages of any living human population. If there is such a thing as the oldest branch of humanity, it is theirs. The light-associated variants at MFSD12, OCA2 and HERC2 turn up at their highest frequencies in two places: in Europeans and in the San. So dark-skinned means closest to the first humans fails on its own terms. The population with the deepest ancestry on Earth is not the most darkly pigmented one, and the alleles they carry for lighter skin are ancient rather than borrowed. Which finally brings us to the thing the title promised, because there genuinely is a molecular signature of the first migration out of Africa, and it is sitting in the same set of genes. When the Crawford team looked at the variants associated with dark pigmentation in Africans, at MFSD12, at DDB1, and TMEM138, at OCA2, and at HERC2, and then went looking for those same variants elsewhere in the world, they found them in South Asians and in Australo-Melanesians. Not similar variants, not convergent solutions to the same problem. The same alleles, identical by descent. Understand what identical by descent means. It means these are not independent mutations that happen to produce the same result in India, in Papua New Guinea, and in the Sahel. It means they are one mutation, in one person, at one point in time, and every copy of it now on Earth is a photocopy of that original, carried in an unbroken chain of bodies. Somebody carried those alleles out of Africa. They went east along the southern rim of Asia, the coastal route, and their descendants reached India and Southeast Asia, and eventually crossed to Australia and New Guinea more than 50,000 years ago. The pigmentation genetics went with them, and stayed useful the whole way, because the whole way stayed sunny. That is why a person in Tamil Nadu, a person in Arnhem Land, and a person in Ethiopia can share a specific stretch of DNA around MFSD12 that traces to a single ancestor, while sharing very little else, and while their languages, cultures, and the rest of their genomes went in completely different directions for 2,000 generations. There is your connection to the first migrations. It is real, it is datable, and it has nothing at all to do with your blood group. And while we are on blood groups, there is one that genuinely does carry an African signal, and it is not ABO. It is Duffy. The Duffy null variant switches off a receptor on the red cell surface, and that receptor happens to be the door that one malaria parasite, Plasmodium vivax, uses to get inside. Without the door, the parasite cannot enter. The variant is close to fixation across most of sub-Saharan Africa, and rare almost everywhere else, and its distribution is a direct map of where that parasite has been killing people for the longest. That is what an ancestry-informative blood variant looks like. It is specific, it is regionally concentrated, and almost nobody has heard of it, while the one everybody has heard of, ABO, is the same three options everywhere on Earth. So here is where all of this ends up, and it is not where the title pointed. The connection to the first human migrations is not a rare badge held by a particular combination of traits. It is not something you either have or do not have depending on a card in your wallet and the color of your forearm. Every single person alive is descended from the people who walked out, or from the far larger group who stayed, and the deepest divisions in the human family, the branches that separated earliest and have been separate longest, are all inside Africa. Everyone outside it, all of them, every population from Portugal to Patagonia, is a single twig off one of those branches. The traits the title picked out cannot carry that story, because both of them are the wrong kind of thing. Skin pigmentation is an adaptation to sunlight that has been rebuilt, lost, and regained repeatedly in unrelated populations, which is why the darkest-skinned people on Earth include groups in Africa, southern India, and Melanesia who last shared an ancestor tens of thousands of years ago. Blood group is a sugar on a cell surface that has been shuffled by disease for 20 million years and looks broadly the same everywhere. The things you can see are almost never the things that record where you came from. That is the whole reason genetics had to be invented. So, no, your blood type is not the original one. It is the newest allele in the oldest system you own. No, dark skin is not the ancestral state. It is a derived adaptation, and half the pigmentation alleles that came before it were the pale ones, and the Neanderthals had them. And yes, the connection is real. It just belongs to a different set of genes than the ones you were told about, and it belongs to everybody. If you know your blood group, tell me which one and where your family is from, and let us see how quickly this comment section proves that every group turns up on every continent. And if you have ever had an ancestry test come back with something that surprised you, a region nobody in the family had ever mentioned, a percentage that started an argument at a wedding, tell me what it said, and whether anyone in the family has forgiven it yet.